Looks like I've got a couple Knives Out in my knife holder. So I've barely come to accept the insanity that was 2020, and we're already in December of 2021. Fuck. Because I live with your condescending ass. Just kidding. I love you, buddy. I'm working on this big December project, so I decided that I'd start something small, something simple, one movie to talk about. And that obviously ballooned into the monstrosity that you see before you, as always. I'm going to be talking tonight about quite possibly my favorite movie of the last 10 years. Don't worry, I have about 12 of those. A film that both subverts and fulfills its genre expectations, and is quite possibly the film with the most Thanksgiving energy of all time. Of course, I'm talking about Rian Johnson's fantastic 2019 film, Knives Out. If you like watching people drunkenly ramble on, analyzing films, or on film culture, please be sure to give my channel a like, a subscribe, a comment, a share, anything at this point. As I stated earlier, Knives Out was written and directed by Rian Johnson, a fantastic writer-director that is quite possibly the most ingenuitive of his generation of filmmakers. And now that I've said that, I'm gonna get a bunch of butthurt Star Wars fanboys to come into the comments and, talk shit. You know what? Come on. I fucking dare you. I'd love the traffic. Star Wars sucks. Come at me. But Knives Out wasn't Johnson's first foray into the detective genre. In 2005, Johnson's directorial debut Brick was released, and it's a fantastic postmodernist hard-boiled detective story set in a high school. It's great, and I suggest you give it a watch, especially if you enjoy the stories of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett. But in 2017, after being freed from the shackles of the mouse, Johnson released Knives Out, and gave us all the brilliance of the character, enhanced by the performance of Daniel Craig, the fantastic sleuth Benoit Blanc.
You're right. Let's back it up.
So I can't get into the whole history of detective fiction, as the genre arguably has its basis in several significant historical texts, such as Oedipus Rex, or the 1001 Nights story, The Three Apples. But mysteries, crimes, murders, and the detectives that solve them are very much a fertile ground for storytelling. But when it comes to modern depictions of detective stories, and I'm talking specifically private detectives and not stories about police officers investigating crimes, in the modern era, we can break them up into two distinct subgenres: the hard-boiled detective story and the gentleman detective story. The hard-boiled detective subgenre finds its roots in American novels, especially starting in the early 20th century, becoming a staple of pulp series during the Depression, much like the noir genre, which kind of sort of melds together with the hard-boiled detective story. They have flawed protagonists and murky definitions of right and wrong. Hard-boiled detective stories regularly take place in the backdrop of systemic and institutional corruption, even so much as making the police to be as much of an antagonizing force as the criminals that they are investigating. Their stories start small, a murder, a missing item, and they snowball and gradually become this giant web of corruption involving well-to-do politicians or wealthy landowners, and it's a whole thing. And as they peel back the layers of the crime, their involvement itself puts them in harm's way, tying their fate to the fate of solving the crime. The hard-boiled detective may bend or break the law in order to solve the crime, but they are ultimately heroes as they are doing the right thing in the macro sense, even if certain things are a little gray, even if their actions make them feel somewhat anti-heroic. They might curse, be quick to shoot goons down in self-defense, or slap a woman in order to get the information they need. Jesus, this was the fucking 20s. But their ultimate goal is to find justice, even if they're getting paid for it. Think of those black and white movies where an alcoholic fedora wearer monologues as he talks to a dame whose legs go all the way up. Key examples of the hard-boiled detective are as follows. The Maltese Falcon in 1941, Kiss Me Deadly in 1955, Chinatown in 1974, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang in 2006, and the Perry Mason TV show that came out in 2020. Pineapple. The Gentleman Detective, on the other hand, has its origins in British literature, and these protagonists are gentlemen, in every sense of the word. Most of these characters are well-to-do, fit firmly into high society, and have a need to solve mysteries. They get paid to solve crimes just like the hard-boiled ones, but instead of an employment, it's a vocation. They don't need the money. They need to solve mysteries. Most of them are well-renowned in their own universes, and their reputation for solving crimes is something that follows them into every story. For the most part, they are separate from the crime, keeping everything at an arm's length, conducting interviews, gathering evidence, finding the clues. But after everything is brought together and they mull over all of the evidence, they use their intellect to monologue at the end of the story where they reveal the nature of the crime and the perpetrator. The prototypical gentleman detective is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. While most depictions of Holmes in contemporary mediums, such as Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes series, Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock, or even the CBS show Elementary, try to turn him into a blend of gentleman and hard-boiled detective. It's less of a truthful retelling of the Conan Doyle stories and more of a frustrating way to modernize the character. When we look at more faithful adaptations of the character, Basil Rathbone, Peter Cushing, or even more modern interpretations of Holmes with Ian McKellen or Henry Cavill, they portray the character as a classical Victorian or Edwardian gentleman. After Holmes, we get characters who were conceived in the golden age of detective fiction, or the era of the four queens of crime, these being Marjorie Allingham, Agatha Christie, Ngaio Marsh, and Dorothy L. Sayers. The key example of this one is Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot, a Belgian expat living in England and solving crimes throughout Europe in famed novels such as Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile, coming in 2020. So, with all the history and backstory that I've just given you, which subgenre of detective fiction does Benoit Blanc find his ancestry? Please type in the comments which one you think he comes from, and I will tabulate the results. For those looking for a more difficult situation, try doing it upside down with your head in a bucket of piranha fish. It's gentleman. He's a gentleman detective. He's a private investigator with significant renown. Even in the film, it states that he had a profile written about him in The New Yorker.
I read a tweet about a New Yorker article about you.
His accent is of the bygone southern gentleman, speaking in poetic metaphors in this deep drawl.
The arc of this case is a tragedy of errors.
And he smokes only what can be assumed as really good cigars, as he contemplates the evidence, mulling over the merit of each bit of information he gathers. Hell, just look at his name. You gotta have a good name when you're a gentleman detective. Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, Benoit Blanc. Get lost, Philip Marlowe or Sam Spade. Blanc is hired by an unknown person to solve the mystery of the death of Harlan Thrombey, famed detective novel writer, played by Christopher Plummer. And it's clear that Thrombey's detectives are the hard-boiled type. They dig.
Rifle and root. Truffle pigs.
Blanc, as he describes his crime-solving method, anticipates the terminus of gravity's rainbow.
It describes the path of a projectile determined by natural law. Et voila.
He observes the facts without vices of the head or heart, determines the arc's path, strolls leisurely to the arc's terminus, and the truth falls at his feet. That's the best way to describe the gentleman detective's way of going about things. Now let's get to the turkey of it all. This movie's a Thanksgiving movie. You got Christmas movies, you got Valentine's Day movies, you even have New Year's Day movies. This movie is the Thanksgiving movie. By the way, this movie is not set on Thanksgiving, but it did get released in late December of 2019. It's the essence of the movie that makes it feel Thanksgiving. The film was shot in the Boston area from October to December of 2018. And what's that right in the middle of the calendar there? Between October and December, that's right, Thanksgiving. So the film has changing leaves, discussions at the fireside, and sweaters. Like, so many sweaters. So many sweaters. The film should have been called Sweaters Out. Movie should have been called Sweaters Out. The film should have been called Sweaters Out. Get it? The plot of the film revolves around the death of the patriarch of this wealthy extended family. And what fractures families more than will disputes and Thanksgiving dinners? In this film, we get the family reunion aspect of Thanksgiving with the whole family in town to celebrate Harlan's 85th birthday, and we get the chaos that results in his untimely, well, I guess I can't call it untimely because he was 85, but let's just say unexpected, death. And the resulting explosion when it's revealed that he has decided to cut his children and grandchildren out of his will, instead deciding to give his considerable assets to his nurse Marta, played by Ana de Armas.
Oh, you little bitch.
And throughout the film, we get to see how this out-of-touch family relates to each other, as they all, in one way or another, orbit around Harlan for financial or employment opportunities. And the cast is just perfect. It is literally the greatest cast ever. You've got Jamie Lee Curtis as Harlan's eldest daughter, Linda, her husband, Richard, played by Don Johnson, and their smarmy bastard of a son, Ransom, played by Chris Evans. Chris Evans here is absolutely relishing the chance to be a complete asshole, especially after spending a decade playing the goody two-shoes Captain America. Then there's Michael Shannon as Walt, Harlan's youngest son, who works with the publishing company of Harlan. His wife Donna, played by Ricky Lindholm, who probably deserves a little bit more in this movie. Like, she definitely does. She kind of gets shortchanged. And their alt-right son, Jacob, played by Jaden Martell. Then there's the fantastic Toni Collette as Joni, the widow of Harlan's son Neil, and her college-age daughter Meg, studying liberal arts. And the family makes an emphasis on the liberal part of that, played by Catherine Langford. And the way they talk to each other, whether it's the ridiculous confidence they bring to discussions that they should not be talking about, such as immigration.
We are losing our way of life and our culture. You always make this race thing.
Children in cages.
Breaking the law. America is for Americans.
Spitting out insults like alt-right troll and liberal snowflake.
I don't know what any of that means.
Or just simply fighting to be the center of Harlan's attention. The film presents this extended family with peak Thanksgiving energy. Just try and tell me that Michael Shannon, with his cane and limp, trying to fight Don Johnson, isn't the epitome of pathetic uncle Thanksgiving fun times. And the way the film presents the crime is absolutely a fantastic way to subvert the audience's expectations of what a whodunit murder mystery is. Harlan Thrombey is dead, assumed to have committed suicide in the night. Everyone seems to accept this fact, even the police, who are confused as to why Benoit Blanc is even here. But as stated earlier, he was hired by an unknown individual.
An envelope, that worked.
An envelope of cash.
And the first 22 minutes of this film are just interviews with the family. So, as the first act unfolds, the audience looks at the lies told by the children to the detectives, the money problems, the arguments, and the simmering to boiling extended family tension that they all feel towards each other. We, who have come into this murder mystery titled Knives Out, are trying to find out who was the one who killed him. However, right as the first act turns to the second, we get the full story, or at least what we think is the full story, through a memory from the perspective of Ana de Armas's character, Marta. On the night of his death, after their charming routine of playing Go before bed, Marta seemingly injects Harlan with 100 milligrams of morphine. Hell yeah, brother. Rock on, ride the dragon. Instead of the preferred 3, as she mixed up his medication. And their rapport is fantastic. Like, even in his dying moments, as Marta is scrambling to find the antidote that's in her nurse's bag, Harlan is just wondering to Marta how fantastic his situation would be for a future novel he's trying to write. After not being able to find the antidote, Harlan orchestrates Marta's alibi and kills himself rather than overdosing in 10 minutes. The fact that her alibi seems clean, plus the regurgitative response to mistruthing she has, builds tension in the audience when he decides to make her his Watson when it comes to this investigation. Now, the film has a sense of dramatic irony, a literary term that basically means that the audience knows something that a character does not. And as Blanc goes through his investigation, gathering clues, and meandering through theories, we, the audience, see Blanc as this blathering buffoon. Whether it's his seemingly complete trust in Marta, even as she not so subtly ruins evidence that they gather throughout the investigation, or his incredible metaphor as to comparing the case to a donut. A donut.
A case with a hole in the middle. A donut.
Blanc sort of takes a back seat to the theatrics of the Thrombey family in the second act. Always there, ever present, ever watchful, smoking a cigar in the shadows, having eliminated no suspects.
You're full of shit.
But in the climax of the film, when Marta seems to have been caught and her confidant Ransom has told the police everything, Blanc springs into a full Agatha Christie-esque revelation of the truth sequence. In this sequence, in a room covered with knives, mind you, he unfolds the mystery to the characters and the audience, revealing that Marta didn't give Harlan the improper medication, as his blood came back negative for morphine. So Harlan's death was actually a suicide. A death that, even more tragically, could have been averted had he listened to Marta when she said that they should call an ambulance. But the reason why she accidentally thought she poisoned Harlan was because Ransom switched the labels of the medication. After learning that his grandfather was planning to leave his entire estate to Marta, he hoped to have his grandfather die at her hands so that, even in an accident, the Slayer rule comes into effect, and she would be unable to collect the inheritance. And this revelation is enhanced by the presence of the police, who are utterly dumbfounded by his sleuthing skills. So, in effect, the film seemingly starts as a subversion of detective stories, which typically reveals the perpetrator and the nature of the murder at the end of the stories, due to Marta's knowledge of Harlan's death presented to the audience at the beginning of the movie, and her proximity to his said death. But at the end of the film, specifically the climactic revelation of the true crime, the psychology of the perpetrator, and the piecing of the puzzle together with such flourish. Knives Out cements itself as a true gentleman detective whodunit story. So much so that in repeat viewings, Craig's blathering on donuts, or his foghorn leghorn accent paired with musings with the police officers as to the nature of the crime and who hired him, etc. and so forth, further enhances the actual detective story of this movie. And sure, there may be idiots who say that, oh, because I know the ending, mysteries are pointless to revisit. I politely beg to differ, as I firmly believe that mystery stories are enhanced by revisitation. As you get a clearer picture of the characters, you get to pinpoint where the lies are and who's telling them and why, and you try to see more specifically and targetedly how the detective pieces the puzzle together. Yep. That's Knives Out. Such a chef's kiss of a detective story. Here's for some of my favorite moments. Benoit Blanc describing what Jacob was doing when he overheard Ransom and Harlan arguing.
What were the overheard words by the Nazi child masturbating in the bathroom?
Ransom's sweater energy. Ransom telling his family what he really thinks about them.
Up your ass, Joni. Eat shit. Eat shit.
If I
Eat
wasn't
shit.
practicing-
You definitely eat shit. Eat shit.
Daniel Craig's whole presence he brings to the character. The look Fran gives in Blanc's description of her watching Ransom tamper with Harlan's medication. Jamie Lee Curtis's whole vibe. Don Johnson's complete ignorance of his assholery in this moment.
There are legal ways to do it. But if
Just the setting of the house. How generally out of touch the entire Thrombey clan are. And of course, the final shot of the film, having Marta look down on the family, who has lost everything due to their petty squabbles and personal foibles, because she was such a genuine and nice person. And Johnson has more stories of Benoit Blanc coming in the future. Netflix bought the rights to 2 future Knives Out sequels, with totally new casts of characters and crimes for Blanc to solve. I just hope Netflix has a legitimate theatrical release to these movies. Because original whodunit murder mysteries, quite possibly, are the most entertaining and engaging films to watch in a crowded theater. And if Rian Johnson and Daniel Craig just want to keep cranking out Knives Out sequels for the next 20 years, I'll watch it. I'll watch every one of those movies, I swear to God. I just want this for Craig's post-Bond career. And the first sequel just wrapped filming in September. It's primarily set on a Greek island, which, okay, Rian Johnson, you are absolutely trying to tap into the Hercule Poirot energy. Stop trying to hide it. And the new members of the cast, forget the Thrombies, they're done. The new characters that Blanc is going to be investigating consist of Dave Bautista, Edward Norton, Janelle Monáe, Catherine Hahn, Leslie Odom Jr., Kate Hudson, Madeline Klein, Jessica Henwick, and Ethan Hawke. And I am here for it. So yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Like, share, and subscribe, or, don't, because who gives a shit, right? I do.